was one of the first people to see the Zapruder film, 26-second home movie that captured President Kennedy's assassination.
For decades, the Zapruder film stood as the only lens through which the world saw Kennedy's assassination.
We don't even see the Zapruder film until 12 years later, video, the actual film rather, of the assassination from a different angle.
But it wasn't the only film. Another camera rolled that day, capturing an angle no one was meant to see. Then it vanished. This isn't the story you've been told. This is the film that mysteriously disappeared after capturing JFK's death. The untold story of JFK's last moments. In November 1963, Dallas, Texas became the center for one of the most tragic days in American history. That morning, the city buzzed with an unusual excitement because the President of the United States, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, was coming to town. For the people of Texas, it was a rare chance to see the young leader whose speeches gave people hope and whose energy seemed to represent a new future for America. This Friday morning, the people lined the sidewalk, waiting eagerly to catch a quick glimpse of the president's motorcade. The route had been carefully mapped out so that as many people as possible could see the president and wave at him. The final stop was supposed to be Trade Mart, where Kennedy planned to give a speech later in the day. But what no one could have imagined was how quickly that day would change. In a matter of seconds, the celebration turned to tragedy. When the first shot rang out, many thought it was fireworks. But the screams that followed told a different story. People's expressions shifted from joy to alarm as the motorcade sped away toward Parkland Memorial Hospital. What had started as a day of celebration quickly turned into confusion and fear. Among the crowd was Abraham Zapruder, a dressmaker who loved filming family moments with his small 8mm Bell and Howell camera. That morning, he almost left the camera at home, worried the excitement of the day might distract him. But at the last minute, his assistant encouraged him to bring it along. That single choice would place him at the very center of history, capturing a moment no home movie had ever captured before. Zapruder climbed onto a concrete pedestal to steady himself and get the clearest view of the motorcade. From his elevated spot, he had almost a front-row seat as the presidential limousine turned from Houston Street onto Elm Street. He filmed President Kennedy and his wife, Jacqueline Kennedy, waving and smiling to the crowd. Everything was perfect until it wasn't. The atmosphere shifted when multiple shots rang in the air. Suddenly, the celebration quickly turned into confusion and then mourning. But somehow, as if frozen in shock, Zapruder didn't stop filming. For 26 seconds, his camera captured everything. Frame by frame, a national tragedy unfolded on his reel, with 486 frames of footage that would later be studied, debated, and remembered as the most important piece of evidence. Unlike the still photographs taken by professional press photographers, Zapruder's film revealed the event in motion, capturing the cheers, the panics, and the chaos unfolding in real time. The news of the death of the president sent shockwaves across the country. Within hours, the police arrested a 24-year-old man named Lee Harvey Oswald. He worked at the Texas School Book Depository, the building from which investigators believed the shots were fired. Oswald was arrested not only for shooting President Kennedy, but also for shooting a Dallas police officer named J.D. Tippit. When reporters pressed him for answers, Oswald denied the accusations and insisted he was innocent. He said he was being framed, calling himself nothing more than a fall guy. 2 days later, the story took a shocking turn. Lee Harvey Oswald was being moved from the Dallas City Jail. Reporters swamped the venue, cameras rolled, and police surrounded him closely. Out of nowhere, a Dallas nightclub owner named Jack Ruby stepped forward and fired a shot. In an instant, Oswald collapsed, and the world watched in disbelief. The moment was broadcast live on television, leaving millions of Americans stunned as the man accused of killing the president was silenced before he could stand trial. Unfortunately, Oswald didn't survive the incident, as he passed away shortly after the shooting, but his sudden death only fueled more suspicion, and the public was left with endless questions. Jack Ruby claimed he acted out of grief and wanted to spare Jacqueline Kennedy the pain of a long trial. But many people doubted his explanation, finding it too convenient. The only person who could have fully explained his role in the events of that day was gone forever, leaving a mystery that still puzzles the nation. With no further evidence, the government came to the conclusion that Oswald had acted alone. But the report did not clear the people's doubt. Instead, it led to many questions. But before we continue, let's rewind for a moment to focus on the man himself. To truly understand why Dallas left such an indelible mark on America, we first need to know who John Fitzgerald Kennedy was. Before Dallas, how JFK became the man America loved. Born on May 29, 1917 in Brookline, Massachusetts, John Fitzgerald Kennedy was born into a very ambitious family. His father, Joseph Patrick Kennedy, was a businessman and diplomat, while his mother, Rose Kennedy, instilled in him a strong sense of duty and public service. From his early years, Kennedy grew up surrounded by privilege, but with it came pressure. Growing up, ambition wasn't a choice in the Kennedy home. It was simply what was expected of every child. Even as a child, Kennedy was intelligent and highly competitive, traits that set him apart from his peers. Life, however, wasn't easy. He faced serious health challenges, from chronic back pain to Addison's disease. Yet, he never let that hold him back. He carried himself with grace and determination, always striving to excel and leave an impression. Those early struggles, combined with his drive, helped shape the kind of leader he would later become. Kennedy's path to public service was shaped by the challenges of World War II. After graduating from Harvard in 1940, he joined the Navy and eventually took command of a patrol torpedo boat in the Pacific. During a daring mission, his boat was sunk under enemy fire, and Kennedy risked his life to save his crew. Stories like this helped build his image as a heroic young leader, someone whose courage seemed to capture the promise of a new generation. After the war, Kennedy turned his attention to public service. In 1946, he was elected to the House of Representatives, and by 1952, he had secured a seat in the Senate. From the very beginning, his speeches were sharp, witty, and full of optimism, connecting with voters who were eager for a fresh vision. During these years, he started shaping the persona that would define his presidency. A leader who could inspire, speak directly to the people, and show that progress was possible even in challenging times. By 1960, Kennedy took the boldest step of his career, running for president against Republican Richard Nixon. The campaign became a turning point in American politics, largely because of television. On the debate stage, Kennedy's calm confidence, youthful energy, and composed presence stood in stark contrast to Nixon, whose fatigue and discomfort were visible to millions of viewers. Americans were captivated by the promise of a new era, one where the country could face domestic challenges and global pressures with courage, vision, and determination. Kennedy won the election, and once in office, he faced the immense pressures of a complex and divided world. At home, he pushed for civil rights reforms, expanded education initiatives, and launched programs aimed at reducing poverty. Abroad, the Cold War dominated every decision. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 brought the world closer than ever to nuclear disaster. But Kennedy's careful strategy and measured diplomacy helped steer the crisis away from catastrophe. His presidency balanced ambition and caution, daring, and diplomacy, carrying the hopes and expectations of an entire nation. But Kennedy was more than his policies or political strategy. With Jacqueline Kennedy by his side, the White House became a symbol of elegance and sophistication. He emerged as a cultural icon, embodying youth, energy, and the promise of possibility. Through his charisma, speeches, and public appearances, he connected with Americans in a way few leaders ever had. Loved by many and admired by others, Kennedy inspired a nation and left a mark that went far beyond politics. Alongside him was his brother, Robert Kennedy, who served as Attorney General, forming a dynamic team that shaped both the presidency and the nation's justice system. Together, they pursued reforms, took on organized crime, and championed civil rights, creating a sense of purpose and hope that defined the Kennedy era. Their combined influence amplified the optimism surrounding the administration, showing the country what bold, principled leadership could look like. But all of that promise was suddenly shattered in Dallas, and the events of that day would change everything. Now that we understand who Kennedy was and why Americans are still shaken by his assassination today, let's turn our attention back to the one piece of evidence that captured it all. Zapruder's camera, the secret witness to JFK's murder. A few hours after Abraham Zapruder's camera captured the tragic events in Dealey Plaza, he realized he was holding something extraordinary, something far too sensitive to fall into the wrong hands. Before long, rumors swirled quickly, and soon curious reporters and citizens were showing up at his door, desperate to see the footage or negotiate for its rights. Everyone wanted a glimpse of the president's final moments. Overnight, Zapruder went from being a Dallas dressmaker to the man in possession of the most important film in the country. The same afternoon, Zapruder and his business partner, Erwin Schwartz, went straight to the Kodak lab in Dallas. They carefully developed the original 8mm film and made 3 copies right away, on the very first day. From there, they drove to the Dallas Police Department, searching for Secret Service agent Forrest Sorrells, who had already caught wind of the film through a reporter. Sorrells immediately understood its importance and asked Zapruder to deliver 2 of the copies to another agent, Max Phillips, at the Secret Service office on Hervey Street. Just hours after the assassination, Zapruder had already handed over 2 copies, trusting that the authorities would use them responsibly. The original film, the one that captured every shocking detail, stayed with him until he sold it the next day. The next day, November 23rd, Zapruder agreed to sell the original film to Life magazine for $150. But to Zapruder, this deal was never just about the money. He was shaken by what he had seen and filmed, and he wanted the footage treated with dignity, not turned into a cheap spectacle. But he made a shocking request that frame 313, the moment of the fatal headshot, should remain private. He believed it was too graphic for the public and wanted to shield both President Kennedy's legacy and the Kennedy family from further pain. True to its word, Life magazine respected his wishes and kept that frame hidden for years. For years, the full Zapruder film stayed out of public view. Only investigators and a handful of officials had access, while the rest of the world saw just a few carefully selected still frames. As expected, this sparked questions and speculation. People couldn't help but wonder what was hidden on that reel and why the most shocking moments were being kept from them. The longer it stayed under wraps, the more mysterious and compelling the footage became, turning it into one of the most talked-about pieces of evidence in American history.
It has been called the most important 26 seconds of film ever recorded. A Dallas dressmaker captured the 1963 assassination of President John F. Kennedy in horrific detail.
Everything changed in 1975 when a national television program known for exploring controversial subjects aired the full Zapruder film. Millions of Americans watched as the reel played, and for the first time, the public saw frame 313, the exact moment of the fatal headshot. The broadcast sent shockwaves across the nation. Viewers were stunned, struggling to process not only the violence, but also the fact that such crucial footage had been kept from them for more than a decade. Questions raced through people's minds about why it had been withheld and who had made the decision to keep it private. The Warren Commission's 1964 report had concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, firing 3 shots from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. But now, the timing of the shots, the reactions of the limousine and its passengers, and subtle details captured on film made some viewers question that conclusion. Some argued that the timing of the shots seemed impossible for a single gunman. Others believed they could see evidence suggesting shots came from multiple directions. Viewers also noticed discrepancies in how the limousine and its passengers reacted. To many, the Zapruder film became proof that the official account left too much unexplained. In 1979, the House Select Committee on Assassinations reopened the investigation, bringing in new experts, analyzing sound recordings, and reviewing all the evidence with fresh eyes. Their findings surprised many. It appeared likely that more than one person had fired at President Kennedy. If true, this suggested the assassination might have been part of a more complex plot than anyone had realized. However, the committee could not identify a second shooter or determine who might have been behind the plan. Instead of closing the case, their conclusions only added more questions, leaving the public to wonder if Oswald had acted alone or had been set up to take the blame. Meanwhile, the ownership of the Zapruder film remained a delicate matter for decades. The Zapruder family controlled the rights, allowing only limited access for research, documentaries, and educational purposes, while keeping the original reel safely preserved. However, everything changed in 1999 when the United States government purchased the original film and placed it in the National Archives, officially declaring it a public record. Later, the copyright was donated to a Kennedy museum, ensuring that the film could continue to be used for study and public education. Despite these measures, questions still linger. Some wonder if every frame released to the public is truly untouched, and whether the full story captured on that reel has ever been completely revealed. For Abraham Zapruder, fame was never part of the plan. He simply wanted to film a happy moment, a visit from a president who brought excitement and pride to Dallas. Instead, he ended up capturing the most haunting 26 seconds in American history. What he thought would be a keepsake turned into a burden, one that tied his name forever to tragedy. The Zapruder film became more than just a home movie. It became the lens through which the world relived a national nightmare. It allowed people to witness history in real time, but it also fueled suspicion, endless debate, and the lingering mysteries that continue to surround that day in Dealey Plaza. But the world was not ready for a shocker that revealed more than Zapruder's film. Another film had been recorded decades ago, tucked away and forgotten, its frames revealing more than the world bargained for. Dale Carpenter's Forgotten Reel. For more than 60 years, the Zapruder film has remained the only footage of President Kennedy's assassination. It was the footage everyone knew, the reel that shaped history. But in 2023, the story took an unexpected turn. A second film emerged, captured by Dallas truck driver Dale Carpenter on that fateful day, long forgotten and tucked away in a milk crate. For a long time, no one knew it existed. But when it finally came to light, the footage offered a rare, fresh perspective on a moment that had already been etched into the memory of a nation. Unlike Abraham Zapruder, who had climbed a concrete pedestal to capture the motorcade, Dale Carpenter filmed from street level. His angle was completely different, but just as valuable. From his spot, he recorded the immediate reactions of the crowd and the Secret Service, giving a close-up view of the chaos and heartbreak as it unfolded. Eventually, history could be seen from a perspective no one had ever imagined. In Carpenter's footage, Jacqueline Kennedy is seen being shielded by a Secret Service agent, her face full of shock and grief. The emotion is raw and immediate, captured up close on street level, something the public had never seen in Zapruder's more distant, elevated shots. How did this reel remain hidden for so long? The explanation is both simple and mysterious. It stayed tucked away in Carpenter's personal belongings, forgotten over the decades, until a family member finally discovered it while sorting through old possessions. What had been lost to time was now ready to be seen by the world. The timing of the Carpenter reel's emergence could not have been more dramatic. In a world where streaming platforms and historical documentaries are everywhere, viewers are eager for fresh perspectives. Carpenter's footage delivered precisely that. A close-up look at a familiar tragedy from an entirely new angle. Historians and researchers were immediately captivated. The reel complemented the Zapruder film, providing additional visual context and sparking new questions about what truly unfolded in those critical seconds at Dealey Plaza. Auction houses and collectors quickly took notice of the Carpenter reel. It wasn't just a piece of history, it was incredibly rare. When it went up for auction, it sold for a significant sum, showing that even decades later, people remain fascinated by the Kennedy story. But beyond the price tag, its true value lay in the perspective it offered. For the first time, researchers could watch the events from a completely new angle, noticing gestures, reactions, and movements that added fresh depth to a day we thought we already knew. Of course, it didn't take long for speculation to swirl around the Carpenter reel. Many speculated that his footage could reveal a new perspective, or capture moments that might change the way the world understood that day. Others questioned why it had stayed hidden for so long. Had it simply been forgotten in a crate? Or was the Zapruder film always meant to be the only one the public should see? Eventually, Dale Carpenter's forgotten reel became a striking reminder of how fragile memory can be and how powerful film is in preserving history. Even in an event as heavily documented as the Kennedy assassination, there were hidden angles, overlooked perspectives, and stories waiting silently to be discovered. While it didn't replace the Zapruder film, it added depth, giving researchers, theorists, and ordinary viewers alike fresh material to revisit and reimagine one of the most pivotal moments of the 20th century.
Few historical moments of the last century are as powerful or as visceral as the assassination of American President John F. Kennedy.
Even after the official report, rumors of secrets and hidden motives continued to linger, because it seems really impossible that one man acted alone to take down the president. Even fishier is the fact that he was extrajudiciously killed before trial, amidst his claims that he was just the fall guy. The endless mystery and conspiracy theories. Ever since that tragic day, people have questioned what really happened, and the more they learned, the more questions seemed to pile up. The official statement released seemed too straightforward for such an incident. The report said Lee Harvey Oswald, a troubled former Marine, had bought a rifle through the mail, made his way to the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, and fired 3 shots. Alone, unaided, he supposedly changed the course of history. But many never bought the story. The idea of one man really behind something so calculated and fast like that was far too good to be true. They believed someone else must have been behind the scenes pulling the strings. This led to endless speculations, with the conspiracy theorists dissecting every detail of the event. The Central Intelligence Agency was one of the first names they pointed to. Kennedy had clashed with them over Cuba, especially after the Bay of Pigs disaster in 1961. Many believed those tensions had turned into open hostility. To them, Kennedy wasn't just questioning their judgment, he was threatening their power. And maybe because of this, they decided to take matters into their own hands by removing the threat. It's possible that within the agency, some people no longer saw Kennedy as a leader. To them, he was more of a threat than an ally. And then there was Robert Kennedy, the president's own brother and the country's attorney general. He had launched an unprecedented crackdown on organized crime, and mob bosses who once ran cities like Chicago, Las Vegas, and New Orleans with impunity found themselves cornered, dragged into courtrooms, and targeted by relentless federal investigations. Their grip on cities like Chicago, Las Vegas, and New Orleans was shaken, and that didn't sit well. Some began to wonder if the assassination was a payback. Also, rumors about Kennedy's personal associations with women linked to mob figures were considered, and this theory gained even more traction. Before long, the idea of a mafia hit didn't seem so far-fetched. Of course, Kennedy's vice president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, quickly found himself in the middle of the swirl of suspicion. Known for his relentless ambition and political maneuvering, Johnson had always walked a fine line, and rumors were already swirling that Kennedy might drop him from the ticket in 1964. Then Dallas happened, and suddenly Johnson was elevated to the presidency. To critics, the timing looked almost too convenient, giving him more to gain than anyone else. And then there's Lee Harvey Oswald himself. Just weeks before the assassination, he reportedly visited both the Cuban and Soviet embassies in Mexico City, which immediately raised suspicions of possible foreign intelligence connections. Whether he was being watched, recruited, or simply moving in suspicious circles, these trips added another layer of mystery. The lone gunman explanation suddenly felt far too simple for an event that shook the world so profoundly. Additionally, there's Jack Ruby, the nightclub owner who shot Oswald on live television inside the police station basement. He claimed he acted out of compassion, hoping to spare Jacqueline Kennedy the pain of a public trial. Few found that explanation convincing. Ruby was known for his mob connections, his quick temper, and the unusually easy access he had to Oswald. To many, it looked less like an impulsive act of grief and more like a calculated move to prevent Oswald from revealing the truth. The magic bullet also added another layer to the mystery. According to the Warren Commission, one shot missed the motorcade, another struck President Kennedy in the head, and a single bullet caused multiple injuries to both Kennedy and Governor Connally. This led to the magic bullet theory. According to the theory, the bullet supposedly passed through Kennedy, struck Connally, and caused so much damage while still coming out almost intact.
Father and son used the latest technology to re-examine the idea that one bullet hit Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally.
One bullet can go through two people if you understand how this particular unusual bullet behaves and what it does after it leaves Kennedy's body.
To critics, it sounded more like something out of a book, not real life. The Zapruder film also fueled endless speculation. Some claimed the footage hinted at more than one shooter, while others suggested parts of it might have been edited or withheld from the public. Over the years, as new evidence surfaced, the mystery only grew deeper, keeping the questions alive for generations. By 1979, the Kennedy assassination was trending again, and the House Select Committee on Assassinations reopened the case, this time armed with more advanced tools. They examined acoustic recordings accidentally recorded from a Dallas police officer's open motorcycle radio. Listening closely, experts found something unsettling. The recording suggested 4 shots had been fired, not 3. This tiny detail reignited the possibility of a second shooter. For the first time, an official investigation hinted that the lone gunman story might not tell the whole truth. But the report offered no names, no arrests, and no real closure. Instead of solving the mystery, it deepened suspicion and left the questions hanging in the public imagination for years. Eyewitness accounts only poured more fuel on the fire. Dozens of people in Dealey Plaza insisted they heard shots coming from the infamous grassy knoll, not the Texas school book depository. Some even reported seeing smoke, movement, or the glint of a rifle barrel. But many of these testimonies were dismissed or downplayed in official records. Some who tried to speak out later said they were intimidated or silenced. Over the years, the list of people connected to the assassination who died under unusual or mysterious circumstances grew long enough to become its own part of the story, fueling rumors that key witnesses were deliberately silenced to protect a deeper secret. However, in a rare interview on the day of the assassination, Abraham Zapruder described the shots he heard.
Scott, it was during an exclusive radio interview I did with Abraham Zapruder in Dallas in 1966 that he described in chilling detail the images he saw unfold in the viewfinder of his 8mm camera.
He remembered hearing the first shot, followed by 2 almost immediately after, each echoing sharply through Dealey Plaza. He recounted the chaos around him, the crowd's sudden panic, and the reactions of the Secret Service. He dismissed the claim of a second shooter, and he said if there were 4 shots, he would have heard them. But despite what he said, it didn't stop people from speculating. More than 60 years later, the assassination of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy continues to captivate and fascinate the world. Most Americans today still believe Lee Harvey Oswald did not act alone. Over the years, experts, journalists, and filmmakers have all offered their own interpretations, but no definitive answers have ever been found. The questions that still linger focus on who was really behind Kennedy's murder, what motivated Oswald, and why Jack Ruby acted so impulsively. Debates continue over interpretations of the Zapruder film and the fresh perspective offered by Dale Carpenter's newly discovered reel. Even decades later, the mystery of Dallas refuses to fade, continuing to captivate and confound the world. Today, history remembers President Kennedy for his vision, his inspiring speeches, and the hope he brought to a nation. His assassination reminds us of how fragile life and power can be. In a single moment, the course of history shifted, showing that even the brightest era can end in an instant, and life can turn from promise to tragedy in the blink of an eye. Even as the country moved on, the full truth of what happened in Dallas remained a mystery, buried beneath layers of evidence, speculation, and unanswered questions. But what if the truth about Dallas was never meant to be uncovered? What if every witness and every clue were just another piece of a puzzle designed to stay unsolved? After all these years, could the real story of Kennedy's death still be hidden in plain sight? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. If you enjoyed this video, click on the next video on your screen.